Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chasing a Murder. Hope everyone had a safe and beautiful New Year's holiday. Now, guys, I am struggling to get these stories out right now because my husband's here and I'm trying to spend time with him. But I also don't want to let all this hard work that I put into this channel just dwindle away. So, this story is in connection to the four Idaho murders, the students from Idaho University. And I won't be going into those details because most of you know this story. The only thing you need to know is these four students were murdered in their sleep inside their own house. And weeks went by, and people didn't think that investigators were going to find any answers as to who was responsible for this heinous act. But right after Christmas, investigators made an arrest. They made an arrest of this guy by the name of Bryan Christopher Kohberger, 6 foot tall, 185 pounds, and the nation was enthralled. They wanted to know who this guy was. And so, guys, I was a little behind everyone else in between trying to live life, spend time with my husband, and research on other stories. Well, I'm trying to catch up, and I have some questions, and I know you will as well. So how did they catch this guy? So we're learning that Bryan, while he was going to school in Washington, and that he was just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the Idaho border where the murders happened. The time frame to get there depends on the traffic, so 15 to 37 minutes from the apartment that Bryan was living in. As Christmas approached, a lot of people didn't feel that investigators had any type of leads, but they did. According to several articles, we are finding out that Bryan, he was at home, his parents' home for the holidays, according to his attorney. We are learning that Bryan's father traveled from Pennsylvania to Washington so that he could take this road trip back to Pennsylvania for the Christmas holidays. Now, there is a witness that come forward, and they're not using their name. They don't want to be identified, who had a chance to talk with Bryan and his father in December about this. So that person who asked not to be identified said that they did not know the father and the son personally, actually, but engaged in a friendly conversation with them at an auto maintenance shop on December 16th in Pennsylvania. Turns out this is while the car that is also a main or key important part to this case was being serviced, the Elantra. CNN also said that they found another witness that could attest that the two did have that car there for service December 16th. The father told this individual that he flew to Washington State and made a cross-country trip with his son Bryan, adding that his son would be traveling to the West Coast alone after the holidays. So a lot of people are wondering, does his father have anything to do with this? Well, according to investigators, they indicated that the suspect's father is not in any way implicated in or attached to these killings that happened in Idaho. Many media sources have attempted to reach out to Bryan's father, but have been unsuccessful. One of these witnesses described Bryan Kohberger as a little awkward, but not suspiciously so. When he spoke with Bryan, Bryan told him that he wanted to go in the field of behavioral criminal justice and become a professor. So this is really interesting because you got to think about how many tips investigators were getting. Over 20,000 tips, and investigators finally narrowed down their focus to one person, and that's Bryan Kohberger, by tracing the ownership of that Elantra back to him. And this is according to two law enforcement sources briefed on the investigation. They also claimed that the DNA that they found at the site where the four students were slain did match to Bryan, and that a lot of the investigators believe that Kohberger planned this trip after he allegedly slain the victims, and that he had premeditated and planned to do this. After the four beautiful students were slain, we are told that a surveillance team with the FBI tracked Bryan several days in the area that he was arrested. So up to 4 days is what we're hearing before they arrested him. They believe that Kohberger had driven across country to his parents' house in the very same car that they believed was involved in this crime. And once they discovered that, they said authorities kept Kohberger under the surveillance of investigators from Moscow's police department. And during that time that they're watching him so closely, the FBI worked with prosecutors to develop a sufficient amount of probable cause for a arrest warrant. We're flipping back and forth a little bit here, guys, because I'm putting this together quite quickly for you. We're learning after he's arrested, Bryan's family, well, they're very shocked, according to his attorney, and that they're in awe over everything that's going on. In fact, they believe that this is out of character for Bryan. So the family was there when Bryan was arrested around 3 a.m. that Friday, December 30th, at his parents' house while on Christmas break. And by 7:30 a.m., it is reported that they had a search warrant and had issued those search warrants. Many of them being for his house or his apartment in Washington, his office at the school, and even confiscating his car. Investigators told us, it was at some point, they said, quote, "We were zeroing in on him being or going to Pennsylvania." The FBI claimed that they tracked him for 4 days before his arrest. A little bit of a contradiction here. They're saying it was the FBI that surveyed them while the law enforcement worked with prosecutors to develop enough probable cause to obtain a warrant. So how did they get to Bryan? How did they, link to this guy? And how did they link him to the crime scene? None of this is solid. I don't have any affidavits or anything in front of me. So we're going by articles and witnesses and investigators, what they're saying. They're saying that genetic DNA connection techniques were used to connect Kohberger to the unidentified DNA evidence that they found at the scene. They're saying that the DNA was run through a public database. There, they find a few family member matches. From there, they're able to put the puzzle together, of course, knowing the description of the car that might have been there at that time, and so on. Since Mr. Kohberger has been arrested, there's been talk of whether or not he was going to be a problem in order to expedite him from Pennsylvania, where he was arrested, back to Idaho, where the crimes occurred. Man, when you cover as many cases as I do, those things start swirling, especially when you cover in Idaho a lot. But since the last report, Kohberger intends to waive his extradition hearing to expedite his transport to Idaho. So that's according to his public defender, Jason LaBar. So here's a video of him graduating.
Bryan Kohberger.
The 28-year-old graduated in May from DeSales University in Pennsylvania with a master's in criminal justice.
So a lot of people want to know, what is this guy like? Remember, he doesn't have a lot of close friends. Not many coming forward, but he has a few. Being one of them, Beast, that he was appalled when he learned that his high school buddy, Bryan Christopher Kohberger, was arrested Friday in connection to the Idaho murders. The two have been friends during their teenage years, spent half of their days at the Pleasant Valley High School, and then the other half taking heating and air conditioning work classes in Monroe County's vocational school. That's pretty interesting because we're going to learn that there's a few people claiming that Bryan ended up becoming addicted to heroin. Vocational school to PhD. Wow. It says that this relationship between him and Bryan, it resolved, went through this personality shift over the course of the summer. That Kohberger was actually down to earth and at one time an overweight teen junior year, at least the end of it. And by the time Bryan started his senior year, he was thinner than a rail. Even more alarming, he said he had an aggressive personality. According to the New York Post, Bryan had also picked up boxing lessons. Former friend who said that he was itching to put his new skills to use. He was either excited about the fact of being competitive or hurting people. The friend said, quote, "He always wanted to fight somebody. He was bullying people. We started cutting him off from our friend group because he was 100% a different person." This personality change of Bryan, well, it became a total surprise and a mystery to his friends. Another former high school friend of Bryan's was Sarah Healy. She told Fox News Digital that there was definitely something off about him. We couldn't tell what it was exactly. I remember one time when I was walking in the hallway and he stopped me and he was like, "Do you want to hang out?" And the more they started talking to friends, they were hearing that there was a possible chance that Bryan had a very troubled past, dealing with heroin addiction and weight struggles. You'd think that that would be enough, but she added that Bryan was also being bullied a lot. She says that he would run away so quickly that she didn't even have time to defend him. Despite that, she said Bryan was very intelligent and always had good grades. And here is what I think is really key, because this is something I was thinking before I read all of this. I felt like he just couldn't make a connection with his soulmate, and it must have been very, very lonely. And this must be where the anger stems from. According to Sarah, Bryan was often rejected and bullied by females. And she said that that's one of the reasons that she thinks that this attack in Moscow happened. It makes total sense. But this is where I start to question the choice he made, the place he chooses to commit this crime, because the state of Idaho is not forgiving. They have the death penalty. And if you want to get off on for mental disabilities, well, Lori Bello can attest that isn't easy. Out of all the places in this nation, he was traveling in between Washington and Pennsylvania, yet he chose Idaho. And also, why did he choose these people? Idaho, like I said, Idaho is a death penalty state. Did Bryan believe that he was smarter than most people who would investigate this crime? Was there more going on inside of this mid-aged student? I don't know about you, but I want to know what happened to someone that should have had a brighter future, capable of greater things. What happened that now he's behind bars? Not only that, since he's been arrested, they're talking about the fact that this guy is in a cell alone for 24 hours. 24 hours on watch, for they are concerned that something might happen to him, but they don't say what. His attorneys share this information. So what gives this attorney the idea that Bryan needs to be alone for his safety or watched by guards 24/7? Are there threats to his life? Is he threatening his own life? Again, there's a lot going on behind the scenes that we have no idea what that is. Now, considering what we're seeing from witnesses on his demeanor, that he's a bit cocky, imposing, smart individual, nice, not afraid to approach people and ask questions. Maybe his only way of communicating with these girls in college was using this research. Maybe he was talking to females that were considered to be the bottom of the chain and still had no chance. This is just some thoughts, some opinions of mine. Something made him click. And knowing what happened to these victims in Idaho, there was a lot of frustration and anger going on there. Now, according to his attorney, he said he spoke to Bryan for around an hour on Friday evening, discussing where he was during the time of the killings. He admits that they know that his cell phone information most likely is going to put him, well, his data, in the border of Washington and Idaho. He says that his client is shocked about the allegations against him. The attorney also says that he doesn't want to really discuss the case with him because he's merely just a representation for the procedural issue as whether or not he wants to be extradited back to Idaho. What I do notice is that Bryan doesn't seem to be too worried about the law. He's pretty calm based off of what we know at this time, considering these very serious charges and allegations. And again, guys, I just keep going back to the fact that maybe this has something to do with him just being lonely, not being able to make that soul connection. And I noticed, I mean, in my notes before I heard from these witnesses, I had written that if girls are not on his list for the extracurricular activities, something else is. And the fact that we haven't heard anything about his dating life for a young, healthy, successful guy, well, I found that odd. I also found it that he might not be this sociopath that people are thinking he might be, because a lot of his research was about talking to people about feelings, empathy, what it felt like throughout their experience. But then again, maybe he is, and he's trying to figure out what normal is. The media is making it out and suggested that students with a criminal knowledge is something concerning when connected to this case. But an ex-cop and a criminology professor who writes textbooks on how to conduct criminal investigations says it's not inconceivable that a student could use that knowledge for wrong reasons, but it's also exceedingly rare. Now, there's a lot more I wanted to share with you guys today, but I've ran out of time. So share below your thoughts or what you're getting from what's available to us at this time. Who do you think Bryan is? What do you think happened? Do you think they caught the right guy? And what do you expect? Do you expect for him to say he's guilty? Do you think that he's enjoying this and this is a game that he enjoyed, sitting on the outside watching a nation fight over who is responsible for these killings while he's just right not too far down the road from where it happened? Okay, guys, I love you guys. Thank you so much for your support. And those of you who haven't subscribed or liked, please do so. We need all the help we can get. And also, you can share these videos on your group pages. And of course, only do that if you truly believe that I do a good job. I certainly try very hard. Learning more every day, guys. I think I'm getting a little bit better. Don't forget about those faces that continue to go missing where they don't have answers. Love you guys. See you guys soon.